What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a very special episode of Yammie Noob, the second very special episode of Yammie Noob. We are here in Sturgis with the Sportster S. You'll have to forgive me here. It is a bit noisy. We are literally right behind the Harley-Davidson booth where they are running demo rides. There are 1,000 different bikes around here running of all kinds of different straight piped and all that good stuff. So we're gonna have to battle with a little bit of noise while I get through this review, but stick with me because this bike is actually really surprising. That is correct. We are here with the 2021 Sportster S. This motorcycle has been something of a mixed message for me. If you saw my first reveal video on this motorcycle, I wasn't exactly super excited about it, but I am very interested to get this thing out on the road and let you know my thoughts, because this is using the same 1250cc engine as the Pan America, slightly modified. Again, here we go with a lot of the noise in the background. Slightly modified, different heads on the pistons, I believe, that is causing this thing to only make 125 horsepower, only, but the same 94 foot-pounds of torque and a much broader power band. This thing is working best between about 3,000 and 6,000 RPM, which, I mean, that's really where you're doing all of your cruising, right? Now, before we get out on the road, one thing I want to do here is give you a quick ergonomics check, because if you can tell by me standing behind this thing, it is very small. I'm going to throw my leg over it at 6'4", 240 pounds. This bike feels positively diminutive underneath me. When I put my foot up on the pegs, I feel like I'm engulfing the whole motorcycle here. It feels very small when I'm sitting on it. However, I have been on Harleys that fit small but rode great. My street rod comes to mind. That motorcycle had some pretty atrocious ergonomics, but on the side of the tire, it was an absolute ball. So let's get this thing out on the road and see what it rides like.
Alrighty, so we're out here on the Sportster S on the Needles Highway in the Black Forest out here in South Dakota. Actually, not that far from Mount Rushmore, believe it or not. And I have spent a good deal of time in the saddle on this motorcycle, and I have a lot of thoughts that I've already developed on it. But I need to say, before we get into the meat of this vlog, that all of the criticism that I'm going to levy at this motorcycle comes from a place of love, and I think that Harley can achieve so much more with this motorcycle than they currently have. I think they have a great platform here upon which they need to develop, and if they do that, they have a winner of a bike here. Now, with that being said, let me say the first thing that I do not like about this motorcycle. It is too small. It is a itsy bitsy little motorcycle, as you saw in the ergo check section that we just came from. It's way too small for a guy my size. It feels like if I was a foot shorter, I'd be super comfortable on this motorcycle, but I'm not a foot shorter. I'm 6'4" in my boots. It's too small for me. Now, a lot of that comes down to the design decisions that they wanted to make with this motorcycle. I was speaking with Paul and Matt, the guys who led the ride that we went on yesterday with the Pan Am, and they were saying the point of the Sportster's styling was they wanted it to look like a concept motorcycle, first and foremost, and they wanted it to look like it was nothing but an engine and two wheels. And in that sense, they nailed it. I think it's a really cool looking motorcycle. It's got this aggressive styling to it. It's low and flat, and you know, the XR 750 tail and exhaust, even though the exhaust cans are gigantic, it looks pretty cool in my opinion. It's definitely one that you need to see in person rather than just looking at it online. So if you get a chance, go sit on one in a Harley dealer. And now, the second thing I'm going to say that could be misconstrued as being overly negative is I think this motorcycle's a bad cruiser. Now, why do I say that? Well, I've ridden this bike all the way down from Deadwood, which is about an hour and a half north. And I stopped just before we got into and had to pay our way into the state park here, or the national park here. And I had to get up and stretch and, you know, get some feeling back in my butt cheeks and stretch my arms and my legs out. I'm really folded up and cramped on this bike. And the seat is made out of, like, I don't know, a couple of feathers. It's really thin, and it really doesn't do a good job of cushioning your bee cheeks when you're sitting on this bike here. Now, the opposite side of that coin of it being a bad cruiser is, honestly, I think they made a great sport bike here. Yeah, it's not wrapped in plastic. Yeah, it doesn't have clip-ons. But man, oh man, can this bike handle really, really well. If you watched my reaction to the Sportster of me saying I don't think it's going to handle really well, I was really on the fence on whether or not this motorcycle was going to be able to handle and live up to that we're going to put the sport back into Sportster claim. I was really unsure of whether or not that was going to be the case, because for whatever reason they decided to put a 160/70/17 on the front wheel here. Now, any of you sport bike boys are probably, your ears pricked up when you heard that, and you're like, wait a minute, 160/70/17, that's like a rear tire, right? Yep, this is the rear tire on a lot of sport bikes, including my Supermoto has a 160 in the rear, and it's got a 180 out back. So we're basically running two sport bike rear tires. That being said, they did something a little bit clever to disguise the fact that this front tire is so huge, and they did it in a way that even I didn't notice until Blockhead pointed it out to me when we were standing in a parking lot talking about the motorcycle. He told me to take a look at the front tire, and I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but look at the profile and the shape of this front tire. It's super, super aggressive. It reminds me of the Rosso 3 that I ran on my 919. It's about the most aggressively shaped tire I've ever seen on a cruiser motorcycle, which is, again, part of the reason why I think maybe they tried to make a sport bike here. So you got this really aggressively peaked front tire, but you also have fully adjustable suspension. You've got a Brembo brake up front, a single Brembo brake, and, you know, it works fine, I guess. I would have liked to see two, just because two is your typical sports setup. It tows the bike down pretty darn quick. Admittedly, I haven't done panic stops or anything like that, but in fact, why don't we test it right now? 40 miles an hour, nobody's behind me. Yep, she slows down real good. So we've got a really well set up chassis and suspension and tires on this bike that really mean that you put this bike on a line and it just stays there. Like, I've been so confident throwing this bike through corners. I was almost more confident on this than the Pan America. And the Pan America's, you know, it's this big adventure bike with crazy adjustable electronic suspension and all that good stuff. This thing just feels super well sprung. It honestly feels like it's sprung for a guy my size, which is odd given the size of the motorcycle. But before we move on, I have got to talk about this engine. So, yesterday I spent about 150-ish miles on a Pan America, and I did a little bit more Pan America riding today to go trade it up for this motorcycle right here. And I said in the Pan America review, it doesn't feel like I'm getting that full 150. It's fast, it sure feels fast, but man, it's so far up at the tippy top, and the torque is nice, but I really wish I had more grunt, more oomph. This thing has so much grunt under the hood. They changed the fueling and they changed the heads a little bit, I think the pistons a little bit, so that you have a much wider torque curve. So if I slow down here to first gear, I'm going about 15 miles an hour. We're sitting at 2,500 RPM. And that wasn't even full throttle, man. This bike gets up and goes. The 94 torques that you get out of this engine, boy, do they really make it go. And that's combined with the low weight, again for a Harley, but low weight at 502 pounds. This bike is really sporty when you get it going. The transmission feels really good. The clutch feels great. The brakes, like we showed earlier, they're feeling pretty darn good. You can really tell by all the pops and crackles that you get out of the stock exhaust that they were trying to make, you know, a hopped up engine here, and they had to tune it just a little bit to make sure that it wasn't gonna upset the European boards and so forth. So, do I think they managed to put the sport back in Sportster like they claimed? Yeah, I really think they did. I think they made a much better sport bike than they did a cruiser motorcycle. Yeah, we have the cruiser ergonomics, but this thing feels like as close as we've come to a Harley sport bike in a long, long time. But that's my opinion on the bike. Let's get Whitney on the motorcycle, do a quick little dual vlog, and see what she has to say. She has not yet ridden this motorcycle, so we'll get her first raw opinion on this bike. Alrighty, so we now have Whitney out in front of me on the Sportster S, and you have not ridden that bike as of yet. I'm back on your Pan America on the lowered seat, so I'm feeling like I'm kind of scrunched up into a little ball. How are you feeling on that Sportster?
As somebody who's ridden, what, half of a cruiser, this feels really weird to me. I feel really low to the ground. I feel like I'm scraping the ground practically. And it's like sport bike up front, right? You're leaned over into the corners, but then your feet are out, which makes for a really interesting, I almost feel like I should be piloting like a helicopter or something.
Yeah, you're kind of scrunched up into a little bit of a clamshell on that thing.
Yeah.
And because the bars are so low, it's like mega clamshell mode. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think that bike is and what it is not. So, I said in my vlog that I believe the Sportster S is a bad cruiser, but a good sport bike.
Okay.
How do you feel, you know, with the bike cruising down the road and on the side of the tire?
Yeah, this isn't something that I could cruise on all day, right? Like, things feel funny. This doesn't feel natural. But I can tell just by how low it is and how heavy it is that you can go into a corner and it just kind of flicks it in. Obviously, I'm so distracted by my posture that I'm like, where am I going? But you can already sense that without me really, you know, this is my first impression, just jumping on it right here. You know, it's like, oh, let's go through this turn. Oh, it does it perfectly.
Do you feel like that front tire is causing you any issues? Do you feel like it's too heavy in a corner, or do you feel like it's not holding a line very well?
I feel like it holds a line pretty well. There's something kind of, I don't know, grounding about having that heavy front end. You're like, oh, okay. But then it's got so much torque, you're like, okay, this feels, I can't tell if I'm confused or if the bike is confused.
Honestly, I think the bike is confused. I think it wants to be a sport bike. And Harley was like, well, we gotta make a cruiser because that's kind of what we make, but we're gonna start slowly drip feeding in a little bit of sport inclination to see if we can't start breaking some of those old cruiser boy habits, you know? I can see why they tried to call it the Sportster, because they made it a small bike that was, you know, sort of a cruiser but lightweight. But riding it around, they should have just come up with a different name and just let it be the sport cruiser that it wanted to be. How do you like the engine in that?
All right, so you've got the same sort of setup, same sound. I'm not getting that front end chatter like you do with the Pan Am. And this feels way torquier.
Right? Doesn't it feel
Yeah.
a lot torquier than the Pan Am?
Yeah, like significantly, like, whoa, God, here we go.
Yeah, that thing will like snap your head back if you're not careful. It's a very torquey motorcycle.
Didn't handle those potholes so well.
Yeah, it's got a very stiff suspension.
Yeah, very stiff.
But I mean, you like that stiff suspension when you're on the side of the tire because you can rail on it. There were a lot of corners when we were coming down here where I was just wide open throttle the whole time and, you know, throwing it side to side, and it felt so good.
Yeah, I like that weightiness in the front when you're turning for some reason. I don't know, it just feels a little bit more stable.
Yeah, it's stable and it's actually fairly confidence inspiring.
Yeah.
But it's not slow to turn in either because of the shape of that front tire. So, rounding out your early impressions on the Sportster, thumbs up, thumbs down, not sure? What you feeling?
I would know right away if I hated it. And I'm not giving it a thumbs down. I think, you know, my brain is growing a new neural pathway as like my feet are forward, but I'm crouched over the bars and it's heavy and you can feel how heavy it is. I've never been on anything like it before. So I think I'm gonna like give it a little thumbs up. It's piquing my interest. You know, it's not a big giant Harley that makes me roll my eyes as it blinds me from all the chrome. You know, this is cool. It looks cool. I mean, it looks like a mini bike when I saw you sitting on it for the first time. But I don't know, maybe you could get used to this, like, you know, you were calling it what, the clamshell position?
Yep.
I think I could ride this.
Well, there you go. That sounds like a solid but tentative thumbs up from Whitney. So let's pull these bikes over and wrap up our final thoughts on the Sportster and see if it's worth that $15,000 price tag.
Come on.
Okay, okay, hurry. It's a girl's bike, bye.
Really quick, we got a moment between all of the noise. So, Whitney, what are your thoughts on the Sportster? Bringing it back after riding it around on that twisty road in the middle of Iron Mountain and all those good stuff. How do you feel about this motorcycle?
I wish I was in the year 2045, living in Japan in the city. That's what this makes me want to do. It's fast, it's torquey, it's beefy, it's heavy. It does take corners really well, but I wouldn't, the gas tank is small and whatever. The ergonomics are funny, but we were eating lunch and 100 million people, that man just ran over his own cane. 1 million people came by, taking pictures, talking to you about it.
Yeah.
They wanted it to look like a concept bike, and I really think they nailed it. It's a head turner for sure.
Yeah, they really did an interesting job with this setup because it, like you said, people were drawn to it. They were wanting to come check it out all over the place. Watching this guy do battle with his own cane. It's very interesting. Guys, Sturgis is, you gotta see it to believe it. So bringing it back to the Sportster here, some of the things that I've noticed that aren't so great about this motorcycle, all right, let's bring it back to the bike for the third time. Let's see if we can get through this piece. So, some things that I noticed about the Sportster that are a bit of a bummer. The size, obviously, first and foremost, I do not fit on this motorcycle. I wish I fit on it because it handles so beautifully and it's so much fun to ride around, and I love the way the engine makes its power, but I simply cannot own this motorcycle because I do not fit on this motorcycle. Secondly, I ride this bike like it's a light switch. The throttle's either on, full throttle, or off. There's no in between. It's so much fun to wind this motorcycle out through the gears, but the problem is you're bound by a 3.1 gallon gas tank, and I ran this thing down to sailboat fuel on here. There was basically no gas in the tank, and I could only fit 2.6 basically gallons into this bike, which makes me think that they've got a massive fuel pump in here, and the range is pretty wanting, especially with the way that I ride this thing.
Like a squid.
Like an absolute squid.
Like a squid
Guys,
in Sturgis. He was just gone. I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm going to get my cup of coffee out and drink it and just watch you go into
Yep.
the sunset.
and I would keep pulling over, and then I'd be like, all right, I'm going to calm down. I'm going to cool it,
and
take
you
it
were
easy.
getting like a schoolgirl. You're like, I was doing this and this and
Yes.
that. I was like,
Yeah,
wow, that
buddy.
is the opposite of this morning. It was cool to watch your transformation.
Now, do I recommend this motorcycle? If you're about 5'5", I recommend this motorcycle.
Yeah.
However, at $15,000, that's a big ask for this bike, in my opinion. That's a lot of money to put down. However, it is worth pointing out that this is the Sportster S right here. An S usually is special or the advanced model of a motorcycle, and they bring out cheaper versions that aren't the S. So consider this your flagship Sportster right here. And there will be models that are a little bit tamer, maybe without all the crazy electronics and so forth and so on in there. So you can expect different models that are perhaps a little bit cheaper. The main thing that this bike has done for me, is this good content? The main thing that this motorcycle has done for me has made me excited about the future of Harley Davidson. There is so much in this, oh my God. So the main thing that this motorcycle has done for me is made me excited about the future of Harley Davidson. I think there's a lot of potential in this motor. They have a class-leading motor right here that they just need to start putting in other motorcycles. It's so good, it's so potent, and this frame handles beautifully.
Yeah.
That if they really put their mind to it, they could dethrone the MT-09, the Duke R, the Street Triple. They have so much potential here. Am I crazy, or does it feel like there's a lot here?
That's a bold statement.
It is a bold statement, but I believe in you, Harley Davidson. I believe in you.
Sure.
So, for this motorcycle, bit of a tough sell, but the future looks very bright. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, it's cool to see like the little details. It's modernized. They're paying attention. They're revitalizing. Come out with a cafe racer and let's talk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited too. I thought it was funny. We were talking real quick. I thought maybe they had typed all the equations into a design program and they were like, this is the best this way, this
Yep.
low, this heavy, and it looks great. And then you were like, no, I don't think so. I think it was all designed by humans and they got in the way of themselves like they always do.
Yeah.
But I'm excited.
Yes.
It's getting someone like me to look, that's saying something.
Yeah. So guys, that is our thoughts on the Sportster S. Bit of a mixed bag, but again, very positive, very bright future ahead of us for Harley Davidson if they are making motorcycles like this better, more sporty, even more fun, and hopefully even at a lower price tag. We'll have to see. But in the meantime, we will catch you later. It's time for me to give this motorcycle back. Whitney needs to give her Pan America back.
No!
It's time for us to go home, back to Austin. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Keep watching Yammie. No.